Happy to kick things off this morning. Yesterday was great. We got a high-level overview of the trends across Canada and how that compares to other countries. But I'm going to zoom us in and talk about what's happening in terms of inequality at the center of the universe, that is to say, Toronto. David was right yesterday. We love to think of ourselves as the epicenter of everything. It's a well-deserved stereotype. But jokes aside, I'm here representing United Way Greater Toronto. So I'm going to be speaking about the Toronto region, and for United Way, that means the City of Toronto, as well as Peel region, which includes Mississauga and Brampton, as well as York region, which is Newmarket, Vaughan, Markham, as well as many others. United Way's vision is of local communities where everyone can thrive regardless of who they are or where they come from. So basically, our mission is the theme of this conference. That's why we're the largest investor in community social services after government. We play a really important role supporting the social safety net that catches people in times of need. But we're not just about the urgent needs of here and now. We know that if we're going to change social conditions, we've got to get at the root causes that lead people into those times of need. That's a side of United Way that you might be less familiar with, the side that does research and that convenes stakeholders from across different sectors to tackle those major issues like poverty, inequality, the impacts of precarious employment, and affordable housing. United Way's been doing research on poverty and inequality for over 2 decades. What I've got up on the screen is just a sample of the reports that we've put out during that time. The thread through all of our research has always been poverty and inequality, what it looks like, how it's changed, its dynamics, and how different features of the Toronto region make it better or worse for the people who are experiencing it. All of the work's been done in partnership with experts in the field, such as yourselves, and all of it's spoken to root causes. United Way is trusted by many different people because it uses this research to inform its strategies and its investments. It's a really important part of the way we do our work and an important part of how we bring others into the work of building a better city region where everyone has a fair chance at a good life. Our most recent report, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today, is the third in a series from United Way on income inequality and its impacts on access to opportunity in the Toronto region. Over the series, we've explored inequality in the Toronto region from different angles. We've looked at households, among individuals, among neighborhoods. We've looked at what's happening in the GTA and compared that with other large Canadian cities, with what's happening provincially, with what's happening nationally. We've also looked within the GTA to compare what's happening in the City of Toronto with what's happening in Peel, York, Durham, and Halton. And we didn't just use stats, we also went out and talked to people about how they feel about income inequality, the impacts on access to opportunity, and ultimately on the prospects for the next generation. And when it comes to inequality, while we might not be in such dire straits as the US or the UK, the trends are troubling, with income inequality rising in Canada's major cities over time. Call your attention to the red line in the chart, which shows that neighborhood inequality grew in Canada's 4 largest CMAs, but Toronto is the most unequal, although Calgary is doing its best to catch up. When we look within the GTA, we see that the gap between the rich and the poor is most pronounced in the City of Toronto, again shown in red. The levels of neighborhood inequality in Toronto are almost double that of the adjacent municipalities of Peel, York, Durham, and Halton. And up to this point, what the entire series of the opportunity equation has shown is that no matter how we look at it, inequality has grown. And it's grown faster in our region, in Toronto, than it has across Canada as a whole. This is another way of looking at the growing gap between neighborhoods. This is data from 2015, showing in blue census tracts where the average income is quite a bit higher than the average across the whole census metropolitan area, and areas in red where the average income is quite a bit lower than the average across the whole. Yellow areas are our middle income neighborhoods, where the average is about the same. And when you look at the progression over time, we see that today, it's much more divided than ever. You're much more likely to live in a have or a have-not neighborhood than you were 35 years ago. Those middle-income neighborhoods are disappearing. The gap is growing. Our newest report, which I'm going to talk to you about soon, isn't about neighborhoods. It's about how different groups of people are impacted by growing income inequality. about understanding which groups of people are bearing the burden of growing income inequality, and ultimately what we can do to mitigate those negative impacts. The reason United Way cares so much about income inequality is because of its impacts on access to opportunity, and ultimately the impact of that on our social cohesion and what we call our civic likeness, that collective identity that we share and value, and that makes the Toronto region such a good place to live. The opportunity equation is intuitive. Effort plus opportunity should equal success. But we know from the research of others, some in this room, that in less equal societies, circumstances that are beyond your control, whether it's the color of your skin or the neighborhood that you grew up in, have a greater influence on the opportunities that you have access to and ultimately on your outcomes. And that's particularly true for people with very high incomes and for people with very low incomes. Rising inequality makes our societies less fair by making circumstances play a bigger role in determining the range of opportunities a person has access to. And while Canada has long been known as a place where the dream of social mobility is alive, our findings show that in the GTA, this dream isn't for everyone. There are growing gaps between haves and have-nots, where they're sharing a certain set of circumstances that are beyond their control. For the haves, those circumstances are an advantage, making the opportunity equation much more likely to result in a good life. For the have-nots, those circumstances make the opportunity equation less likely to work. And that's not fair. It weakens our civic likeness, that glue that holds us together. Our report, Rebalancing the Opportunity Equation, which we just put out in May, looked at how average incomes have changed over time between young adults and mid-aged adults, between immigrants and Canadian-born, between racialized groups and white groups, from 1980 to 2015. We did this analysis using census data in the RDC at the University of Toronto with the help of Dr. Alan Wachs and Dylan Simone from the Neighborhood Change Research Partnership. Oh, no, hold on. The first finding from those results are that not everyone gets a successful start in life. Young adults in the GTA are more disadvantaged today than they have been in the past. This figure shows changes over time in average income for 3 age groups: young adults, mid-aged adults, and seniors, for Canada on the far left, and then for the 3 regions, Peel, Toronto, and York. All the incomes are in inflation-adjusted dollars to 2015. And nationally, we see that the economic prospects for young adults have improved over the last decade after some decline. The income gain was limited, however, so that by 2015, young adults had an average income similar to what they had in 1980. But a different story emerges when we look at Toronto, Peel, and York. Young adults have actually become poor over time. In real terms, on average, a young person in each region was earning less than what they did in 2015 than they did in 1980. Furthermore, the income gap between young adults and mid-aged adults has grown over the last 35 years in all 3 regions. There's a more positive story when we look at seniors. They experienced more consistent increases in average income over time, surpassing the income of young adults or young people in Toronto and York. So why should we worry about these trends? Of course, we expect young people to earn less than mid-aged people, but our acceptance of this was based on the idea that they had access to secure jobs with prospects for career advancement. All we had to do was wait. But we know that today's labor market is different. While the rise of precarious employment is debatable, we know that we do have more precarious jobs than we had in the past. Jobs that offered little opportunity for advancement. So young people today are not only starting further behind, but they have less access to the opportunities they need to catch up. Our second key finding was that in the GTA, it doesn't matter how long you've been in Canada. The fact that you weren't born here means that you're likely earning less. The next 4 figures, one per geography, shows changes over time in average income for 4 different cohorts of immigrants and the Canadian-born population. Again, at the national level, after years of decline, immigrants have seen an increase in average income in the last decade. However, the income gap between long-standing immigrants and Canadian-born people has widened over time. But that's, again, different when we look at the regional level. Immigrants, regardless of their years of residency in Canada, have become poorer over time. In real terms, immigrants in Peel, Toronto, and York were on average making less in 2015 than they did 35 years ago. Furthermore, a long-standing immigrant in each region was making similar or even lower income than a Canadian-born person was in 1980, although in 1980 they had very similar incomes. And that's the case for Peel, Toronto, and for York. Our third key finding was that the racial divide in the GTA has reached a historic high. This figure shows changes over time in average income for racialized and white groups. And here it's important to acknowledge that we know there's variation within both white groups and racialized groups. Not all racialized groups are having the same experience, just as all white groups are having the same experience. But we are limited in terms of what we could, how we could disaggregate the data. Racialized groups have become, oh geez, I gotta keep up with this. Racialized groups have become poorer over time. In real terms, in 2015, racialized groups in Peel, Toronto, and York were earning less or similar to what they did 35 years ago. And the income gap between the racialized and white groups has increased over time, the gap being most shocking in the city of Toronto, a place where we like to use the phrase, diversity is our strength. So the opportunity equation is working for some, but not for all. Young people, immigrants, and racialized groups are seeing that their circumstances are barriers to their success in today's GTA. These groups have to work harder to achieve the income needed to thrive, and the situation is worse in Toronto than it is across the country as a whole. Income inequality unbalances the opportunity equation, and the impact of this stretches beyond individuals and affects us as a society as well. It undermines the value of fairness that keeps us together. So what can we do about it? United Way made a range of recommendations within 3 buckets: ensuring everyone can participate in society, enabling people to get ahead, and making life more affordable. But I'm just going to focus on the second bucket today. As income inequality and opportunity gaps grow, it's increasingly important that we make targeted investments in the knowledge, the skills, and the capacities of the groups that are facing barriers to help them get into secure, stable jobs with a future. One way to do this is the replication and scaling up of sector-specific workforce development systems. Groups are systems that target the individuals being excluded, that provide in-demand skills, links to employers, good jobs, and most importantly, a suite of wraparound supports that ensure the success of those individuals. While we know there's lots of existing employment programs, the current system is a patchwork that lets too many people fall through the cracks. That's why United Way has been deeply invested in community benefits agreements. CBAs are benefits for the local community in infrastructure and development projects or on goods and services. They began in the 1990s as a way to compensate residents who were being displaced by urban renewal projects. But today they're commonly used in other jurisdictions like the US and Scotland as an effective policy tool to maximize the social return on public infrastructure investments. One potential benefit that a community can receive is employment, training, apprenticeships, as well as social procurement for the residents and the local businesses of the communities where development is occurring. United Way's role in this work has been to bring people together to organize, because a coordinated group speaking with one voice has been an essential ingredient for success. In Toronto, the Toronto Community Benefits Network is a group of community partners, labor, workforce development groups, government, and industry that coordinates CBA work across the city, a model that has been replicated elsewhere. United Way's role has also been to hire and manage researchers, project managers, and evaluators for this work, and we do advocacy, influencing government at all levels to adopt CBAs in their own jurisdictions and helping them imagine the possibilities of this model. United Way is involved in a range of CBA work, often playing a catalyst role or as a backbone organization that coordinates action across a range of stakeholders. And we're involved in the Eglinton Crosstown LRT, the Finch West LRT, Woodbine Casino development in North Toronto in Rexdale, the Huron-Ontario LRT that's being developed in Mississauga, as well as a West Park hospital development in Northern Toronto. The Eglinton Crosstown is probably the most well-known. It's Ontario's first large-scale public infrastructure development that contractually requires the developer to ensure that the local communities and the historically disadvantaged populations that live in those communities benefit from the province's investment. To meet this requirement, the developer is providing a range of employment and training and apprenticeship opportunities to these groups, as well as purchasing goods and services from local suppliers and social enterprises whenever possible. And I'm going to show you a quick video here about that work.
My name is Ahmed Abdi.
My name is Renee Roy.
My name is Jonathan Hapta.
I'm the first person to get hired through the Community Benefits Program with Metrolinx.
Projects such as Eglinton Crosstown, which is the largest transportation infrastructure project in Canada, as a way of transforming local communities.
United Way for decades has brought people together, but we always lacked the glue to make it stick and find tangible ways to get people good jobs in specific neighborhoods. And then pops in Metrolinx.
Community benefits usually includes jobs and apprenticeships and professional administrative and technical jobs. It also usually includes contracts and social procurement for local, social, and diverse businesses.
This is project and policy innovation at its best. You're building a $5.3 billion light rail transit in a way that's bringing community to the table, inviting them in from the beginning.
It's good for young people and for newcomer people.
We have seen firsthand that community benefits really changes lives.
You've given me a chance to get a stable home. My truck is just a vehicle now, and this is kind of my community now.
I was able to support my wife, my new family, and prepare for my kid. Apprenticeships like this are important because they give youth a different route, something productive, something that has the potential to make a lot of money and get a lot of transferable skills.
Not only a life changed, but an entire neighborhood transformed with jobs and dollars going back into that local economy.
The great lessons we've learned on Eglinton and the Community Benefits Program provides us with an excellent platform to roll these same benefits out on our other LRT programs, but also on our really big program, which is the GO expansion.
10 years from now, I want us to be able to look back and say, with the public infrastructure dollars we spent, we not only built a world-class piece of infrastructure, we are intentional about ensuring that those in the community who needed opportunity most actually shared in the benefits of that project.
It is the blueprint for us and for inclusive economic growth in this province and in this country.
Because in the end, our mission is to connect our communities, and we do that even better when there are more local benefits for those communities.
So as of June 2019, there have been over 268 total placements on the Eglinton Crosstown project. That includes 153 professional, administrative, or technical positions and 115 apprenticeships. In terms of where we're at policy-wise, the City of Toronto has adopted a community benefits framework which uses city-funded infrastructure projects to achieve inclusive workforce development, supply chain diversity, as well as other community-identified priorities. CBAs were enshrined in provincial legislation in 2015 with the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act, which seeks to implement CBAs across all public infrastructure projects in the province. The federal government has also taken an interest in this approach with their Community Employment Benefits Initiative, which encourages but doesn't require provinces and territories to include targets for community employment benefits in projects in the Investing in Canada infrastructure program. What more needs to be done? We're still advocating for this model to be used in all publicly funded infrastructure projects across Canada. We're also working with private developers to consider how they could use this model for their own projects. The growing sophistication of many companies' corporate social responsibility strategies offer an opportunity for us to push this work in the private sector. United Way feels like CBAs are the focus, that focus on employment benefits for the local communities in which development is occurring is one promising model for how we can move towards more inclusive growth, ensuring that nobody is left behind. Thanks very much.